From your local election headquarters, this is a special edition of Newsmakers, a 12 News debate.
And welcome to the special edition of Newsmakers, a debate in the Republican primary for mayor of Cranston. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim White.
And I'm Ted Nesi. The winner of this primary will face off against Democrat Robert Ferri in the November election.
Each candidate will have an opportunity to give a one-minute closing statement at the end of this debate, and the candidates are, from left to right on your screen, Ken Hopkins. Mr. Hopkins is the current mayor of Cranston. He was elected in 2020. Spent years as an educator in Cranston schools, and Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung. Ms. Fenton-Fung is a state representative, also first elected in 2020. She's an acute care physical therapist. Candidates, as you know, there's no strict format to today's debate. We're looking for an open and honest discussion of the issues. We will, of course, allow some back and forth. We encourage it, but if you're not answering the question or taking too long, we will jump in. Let's begin. Candidates, we want to start with a topic we've heard from our viewers about and is impacting quality of life in your city. Rats. Cranston residents say rats have overtaken some neighborhoods. Mr. Hopkins, you've been in office for nearly 4 years. We've heard from some viewers who say you don't have your arms around the problem. What do you say to them?
Well, Tim, I would say, first of all, it's a statewide issue. Following COVID and the amount of trash that was picked up, we're up about 20%. A lot of people getting takeout lunches, takeout dinners, eating at home more. What we've seen is an uptick in the type of trash and where it's disposed, keeping their cans covered, so to speak. And there are other human habits that are bringing this in as a problem. We've addressed it. We have the only full-time rat control inspector in the state. It does take time, but again, we've put things on our website. We're very much ahead of the game. We know exactly where the problems are, and we're trying to address it.
Is one person to handle this situation in the entire city of Cranston enough?
Well, initially, the people are asked to use their own resources, go to private rat control types of institutions. But the bottom line is, it's an issue statewide. It's not just into Cranston. And it has to do with the recovery from COVID and the habits that people have.
All right, Ms. Fenton-Fung, if you became mayor, what would you do, or what would you do differently?
Right, and what we'll hear from Ken today, as we've gone through, this is our 5th debate now, is that Ken always seems to place the blame on somebody else. It's always someone or something else's problem. Now look, he's always a day late, a dollar short, and 2 steps behind, and this is a real clear issue. In Knightsville, in Oaklawn, all we hear is the rats. They're people who are paying high tax dollars. We have the 4th highest tax burden in the entire state. They expect more for their money. We only have one rat control individual. He goes out. Sometimes he gets to bait. People will say, like, hey, look, I called to have my house baited. They didn't come out for 6 months. Well, that doesn't help the problem. These rats, we've been going door to door. Some of them run by us.
So what would you do differently?
I would probably, if we cannot hire, we have the one. I would like to add a second, but in the interim, until finding one, they're kind of hard to find, would be to actually go out and outsource and pay privately to get control of the problem in certain villages. You shouldn't be paying some of the highest taxes in the state and not getting your money's worth.
So to be clear, the city should pay private vendors to go into certain neighborhoods and take care of it.
To tackle the problem head on, get the problem under control, make sure that we're replacing the trash bins that need to be replaced. Sometimes the rats have chewed through. And then also we have to take a look and hold businesses accountable. A lot of times you'll see, whether it's restaurants or condo associations, they have these big dumpsters. And you'll see the lids are open. What does that do? It attracts rats. And a lot of times throughout the city right now, we're not holding people accountable to maintain their properties. We hear that a lot in certain areas like Arlington of the city. Minimum housing standards are not being kind of held, our landlords aren't being held to a higher standard. We see that with some of the restaurants too. We need to be more proactive in sending out our building inspectors.
All right, 30 seconds before we go to Ted here. Mr. Hopkins, I'll let you respond.
Yeah, we have hired private contractors to go out, especially when situations get pretty serious. When you're looking at a rat infestation, again, the habits of people are creating this situation. I personally have gone out. I've talked with people. I've tried to explain to them how they're handling the situation. We've put things on the website. We've had private contractors go in and work with people to try to rectify the situation. So to say that we're not doing anything, once again, it's a lie, and we're out there working on it on a daily basis.
This is a Republican primary, so I want to ask you both about your party. Ms. Fenton-Fung, I'll start with you on this. There is a perception you don't always get along well with other Republicans. You were elected in 2020 as a Republican, but you didn't join the House GOP caucus, and you voted for the Democratic Speaker, Joe Shekarchi. Now you're mounting a primary challenge against a fellow Republican who you supported 4 years ago. Have you been putting your personal ambition before the good of your political party?
No, and remember, I represent District 15, and while I'm also a Republican, I bring those conservative ideals to the House, and the way I vote, obviously, more conservative than not. The reason I don't caucus with the Republicans, which I had every intention of doing, when I first got elected, this state's really small, as we all know, and sometimes we run into each other. My husband had an issue with an employee. She was asked to resign, and lo and behold, guess who ends up being the chief of staff in the House Republican office. So when I first got elected and kind of started to meet with them, I found out very early on that some of those hard feelings because of that previous needing to resign underneath my husband was going to be held against me. And I had just beaten the Speaker of the House. I was the first person in over a century to do that. So I had to deliver, and I was not going to let anything step in my way. So I'm basically a Republican who works out of a different office. I have a different secretary, but I absolutely love everybody in that caucus. They're so kind. I go to the Christmas parties. I support their bills. They support mine. It's just that, quite technically, I have a different administrative assistant.
Mr. Hopkins, you're the top Republican in Cranston, but since you became mayor, the council flipped to Democratic control, and you found yourself frequently battling the council. Why has the GOP had some election struggles since you became the titular head of the party in the city?
Well, I can tell you this: the Republican Party in Cranston now is as strong as ever. By a vote of 22-1, I was endorsed by the Republican Party. I have reunited the Republican Party in the city. We have a full slate of candidates ready to go for this election. For the first time in a long time, we are working as a team. Now, when I look at my opponent's record down at the State House, she also voted in the Democratic bill to do the next budget. The next budget's going to cost the state about $260 million in debt. She voted with the Democratic majority on that one. And that's not the only one that she's crossed aisles to vote with. Last night I had a fundraiser. The minority leader was there last night, Mr. Chippendale, and he knows exactly where I stand in terms of my Republican conservative values. I look at my opponent as being the complete opposite. She votes an awful lot with the Democratic liberals.
I think it's kind of funny that you bring up the budget, because I was not the only House Republican to actually vote for the budget. In fact, the Minority Leader Chippendale, Brian Newberry, several other Republicans joined in because Joe Shekarchi, our current Speaker, had reached across the aisle and included a lot of Republican initiatives in that budget. I stand by my vote for that, as I'm sure the other Republicans who voted for it do.
Final thought, and then we'll move to Tim.
I think when you look at the $260 million budget deficit that it's going to create, I never would have voted for that.
I think that when it brings back $5.4 million for public education here in Cranston, when Ken Hopkins level funded education, I think that's a deal I'll take all day.
That's not true.
It is.
That's not true.
All right, candidates, we're going to do a pop quiz section now.
Oh, no.
Voters want to know if you have a grasp on the most important issues facing the city. I'm going to ask each candidate a quiz question to test that knowledge, and I'll switch up who we start with.
Okay.
Ms. Fenton-Fung, we'll start with you. One of the mayor's most important jobs is putting together the annual city budget. I'm not looking for down to the penny here, but ballpark. What is the size of the current fiscal year's municipal budget?
It's about $320 million.
And Mr. Hopkins, does she have that right?
Yeah, she does, and keep in mind that prior to my administration taking over, the last budget was $325
I don't want to litigate
million.
these, Mr. Hopkins. We'll go to the next question.
Million.
We'll stay with you, Mr. Hopkins. Under the current city charter, when fully staffed, what is the number of sworn personnel in the Cranston Police Department? Mr. Hopkins?
Well, right now we're 4 under the total.
What would be the total if fully staffed?
125.
And Ms. Fenton-Fung, does he have that right or wrong?
I think it's closer to 150.
That's correct. It is 153. Mr. Hopkins, I'll stick with you. Cranston has a closed pension plan for police and fire that has a shortfall of more than $200 million. approximately now, what is the current funding level of that pension plan? I'm looking for a percentage.
Yeah, we continue to put 3 to 4% into that every year. That's one of the reasons that when I became the mayor, I inherited that.
I understand. What is the funding? What is the funding level right now?
Yeah, we're working 3 to 4% every year to try to eliminate.
What's the total funding level right now, percentage?
3 to 4%.
Okay, Ms. Fenton-Fung.
I think it's around 24% if they're keeping up with their OVEP.
24.7%.
Yeah.
Ms. Fenton-Fung, we don't need it down to the pupil, but at the start of the school year, what was the total number of students enrolled in the Cranston public schools, start of the last school year in October?
Yeah, it's about 11,000. That number has been shaky over the past few years because of COVID, but it's
Mr.
about
Hopkins,
11.
she says 11,000.
That's accurate.
10,126. Ted?
All right, I want to ask you both about housing. It's arguably the biggest issue, certainly one of the biggest issues across Rhode Island. According to the group Housing Works RI, a family needs to earn $118,000 a year to buy the typical home in Cranston and needs $78,000 a year to rent the typical apartment. Mr. Hopkins, I'll start with you on this. Do you think Cranston should build significantly more housing units over the next decade? And if so, which parts of the city do you think are ripe for that sort of growth?
Yeah, we've already targeted some. There's some houses being built over in on the West Warwick-Cranston border. There's a new development there. We're renovating the old Cranston Print Works that has sat vacant for the last 50 years. We're over there putting in new townhouses with Brady Sullivan. There are 4 apartment complexes that are going to be built across the street from the Cranston Print Works. So again, Cranston's moving in that direction. One of the schools that we have targeted for demolition, we've already gotten rid of it. It's an old school that's been dilapidated. We're building 4 new houses there. So Cranston continues to have that vision. When Arlington School combines with Gladstone, we'll have about 7 acres of property over there that we'll continue to build on.
And Ms. Fenton-Fung, same question. Do you think Cranston should have significantly more housing? Where would you see as an area for growth, if so?
So when I'm at the doors, one of the biggest needs that we hear is that for our older adults, there's no place for them to go. When they're on fixed incomes and they can no longer afford the constant tax hikes, their property insurance going up. There's no single level condos. There's not enough assisted livings or independent living communities here in Cranston that they could transition to so they could enjoy Cranston and worry less. That's the type of housing I would start with first, because those seniors who have been here for 40, 50 years doing the right thing, I want to make sure that they can live out the rest of their years here in Cranston. So I would take a look and try to center it around our village hubs, because that way we could create more walking traffic. They could just walk to their restaurants, their favorite cafes. And so those are the things I would look at first when we're talking about housing, but it's a larger need. He brings up some of the apartment complexes he's trying to build, but there's not always the affordable component to it. And so that worries me. We're very, very tight on staying within that state mandate of affordable housing, and we really depend on our apartment units. So that one complex could throw us off, and I'm a little worried about that.
I want to ask you a follow-up. Ms. Fenton-Fung, I'll stick with you first. You know, we know there is often enormous opposition in communities to specific housing projects. People worry about traffic. They worry about impacts on the schools. And yet at the same time, if you don't build anywhere, the costs just keep going up.
Exactly.
If you were mayor, how would you think about striking that balance? Neighbors who don't want housing, but an overall need to bring down prices.
It's a catch-22, right? Because everybody realizes, they all complain, my housing is too much, but they're like, oh, I don't want it here. We have those issues in the past, but that's what a great leader does. It brings people together and say, hey, look, let's go into, say it's Rolfe Square, and say, we're gonna take a look. This is our vision. This is what we'd like to do and foster with development. And so that people, change is difficult in the state. We know that. But when we walk people through it and see the vision, and so it's not just, I hear there's 100 new units coming online. It's that this is how we want to design it. This is how we want to integrate it into the community and how this can be good for you. I think it's a lot more communication. It's a lot more community outreach. My husband used to do this all the time. He used to do town halls. When he and the unions and the city council got together and did pension reform, they had town halls all over the city. And that's how you get people to come with you. It's not that you're fighting each other like what Ken did with the Budlong pool. There was always fighting, all these meetings. What we have to do is work better together and work much better with the council.
You two spent a lot of time in the pool, which is why we're not on other debates, which is why we're not asking you about it.
I'm fine with that today.
Ken,
yes.
Excuse me, Mayor, same question to you. How do you think about that balance between neighbors who don't necessarily want change in their area, but the needs clearly in the city to make things more affordable with some growth?
Ted, when I first took over, the city of Cranston was dormant. I've recreated new vision in Main Street concepts, the revitalization on the day one that I took into office on Rolfe Square. I revitalized that neighborhood. You see walking traffic, you see businesses. The second project that I did was down in Patuxent Village. We have everybody in Patuxent Village is out there walking. They love the facility. There's outdoor dining. There's entertainment. The third area that I'm concentrating on right now is over in Knightsville. We recreated Eatery Park, which was completely in shambles prior to my administration. I went in with the vision to revitalize it. We have people over there that come in and park in the public parking that I've provided, free of charge. They are walking to the restaurants. And one indication of all of this is that every single time that we have either a show at the Park Theater, the businesses are telling me that they don't have enough help. We have so many people coming in to go to dinner in Knightsville right now. It's totally revitalized. I've started a fourth area in Oak Lawn Avenue. Most recently, we had Hulk Hogan there to promote the area. But we've got a series of vision that we're continuing to build on for the city of Cranston. And I'm glad that the rep brought this up, because this is exactly what I've been doing for the last 4 years.
We do need to move on. I saw your hand up. 20 seconds each, Ms. Fenton-Fung.
Absolutely, thank you. So when we're talking about Eatery Park, they spent millions of dollars to revitalize that one area that nobody's ever in that park. You can drive by at different times of the day, but they completely ignored a park just about a quarter mile away, Sevo Park. It's named after one of our fallen veterans in Vietnam. Completely in shambles. We're not taking care of what we already have.
That was 20 seconds. 20 seconds for you, Mr. Hopkins.
You know what? Once again, this is more BS from BA. Sevo Park has been cleaned up. We've done our job. The parks are better than ever. Opening day at the Cranston American Little League, Cranston Eastern, the president stood up in front of a huge crowd and said, "This is the best these facilities have looked in 20 years."
All right, we're going to have to stop that conversation there.
Ms. Fenton-Fung, in May, your opponent accused your campaign of using fake identities, fake emails for public records requests. Let's clear the air here. Have you ever created an email address under a different name for a public records request or other campaign purposes?
So when we're talking about the APRA request that you're going in, there were other people who put in APRA requests for us.
I'm asking if you have done that.
No. But what I will say is,
has anyone from your campaign or your family done that?
No. What I will say is that when we're talking about APRA requests, one, you could put Elmo on it and it's completely legal. Let's clear that for everybody watching at home. And you know what's really difficult? When my husband has put in APRA requests this summer, he has not responded to them. In fact, yesterday, Alan had to file 2 complaints with the Attorney General because he will not respond to the APRA requests, including how we spent the money for COVID. Those are things that we'd like to know. And so when you're not responding to APRA requests, it makes us think you're hiding things.
She says your administration is opaque, Mr. Hopkins.
Once again, Tim, just look up one name, Ruben Ramirez. It was used repeatedly in every single one of Alan Fung's campaigns for governor, for Congress, and now the attacks for me as the mayor of the city. I still haven't met this gentleman. I've asked repeatedly who he is. We know it's a fictitious person. I don't know who he is. So once again, the representative is not telling the truth. In terms of my APRA requests that were asked for by the former mayor, I am the mayor right now. She's asked for those requests. My legal team is working on it, and they're getting the answers back.
It's over 6, almost 7 weeks with no response. That's why the complaint was filed with the Attorney General. You guys know how this is. You have 10 days to respond.
Well, we've had plenty of requests that have attacked me, and we found out based on the Ethics Commission that none of them are true anyway.
Well, I want to ask you about a criticism you faced in the campaign, Mr. Hopkins. Look, the country's had a big debate this summer over when politicians should step aside from elected office. You just turned 70 years old, and Ms. Fenton-Fung has argued you don't, quote, have the energy to keep serving effectively as mayor. What's your message to Cranston voters who ask if you have the energy to keep doing this job until you're 74?
Well, especially the elderly population of our city. I mean, I have more energy now than I've ever had. I walk daily, I knock on doors, I'm in great condition. I've lost 12 pounds during this campaign. 70 is the new 50. I feel great, and I'm ready to continue.
Ms. Fenton-Fung, do you
I
accept
actually
that?
think, look, my dad's 81 and he could run circles around all of us, okay? It doesn't matter your age. It actually matters your commitment to this job. Ken, we have his public calendars out of a public records request, and what do we find? He has absolutely nothing on his schedule 40% of the time, or nothing, or just one event 60% of the time. City Hall workers just say he's never there. Now look, we want to see who's not only got the energy to do this for the next 4, but hopefully in my case the next 8 years. I'm going to be a 24/7 mayor, just like my husband was. Most of the time, it's funny. Most people are like, I've never seen Ken until just about 2 or 3 months ago around election time.
I'll let you respond, Mr. Hopkins.
You know, I continue to laugh at this. For the 12 years that her husband was the mayor, 3 times he was running for state office and federal office. He was in Tiverton, he was in Burrillville, he was in Smithfield, he was all over the place. I live this job 24/7. If my phone rings and there's an emergency at 2 o'clock in the morning and I get up and I meet the fire chief at the fire, I don't write that on my public schedule. That's a guide for me to go by. I don't write everything down that she's saying in her opera request. I mean, people know, look at my website. I'm in the city 24/7, 7 days a week.
I'll give you 20 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, there's things on his calendar like setting aside time to watch PC games in the middle of the day with his staff. Those calendars are what he's doing. He's not showing up to work. Ask anybody at City Hall. They are completely frustrated. He's a part-time mayor taking a full-time salary.
Final thought, and then we're going to Tim.
Go Friars. I mean, it was a playoff game. The people are interested in it. I'm a season ticket holder. I love my Friars. It's a quality of life issue that she's talking about. I was in the office that day. I work 24/7 for the city of Cranston.
All right, I want to ask you both about the Cranston Police Department. Sort of an up or down question here. Mr. Hopkins, I'll start with you. Colonel Michael Winquist has led that department for about 10 years now. If you return to office in 2025, will you stick with Colonel Winquist or move on from him?
Absolutely. He's the best colonel in the state. He does a very professional job. My predecessor wanted him fired, wanted him gone. He is the best that Cranston has, and we have the safest city in the state of Rhode Island as a result of his work.
Ms. Fenton-Fung, same question to you. Stick with Colonel Winquist or move on?
So I really like Mike personally. We get along great, and he's a great resource for me at the State House. After the election, we'll have a great conversation, and I just want to make sure our plans are aligned. I want to be a little more proactive with the police department. We've gotten away from things like the HOPE initiative, which helps to target the opioid crisis. We have the 5th highest opioid fatality rate here in Rhode Island right now. I want to be a little more aggressive in certain areas. So if our plans align, then absolutely.
According to the city charter, you need just cause to move on from the colonel. Do you have anything that would reach that level of just cause?
No, but I think we just want to make sure that our plans are aligned, right? These are all, when we're talking about directors, whether it's police chief, fire chief, and whatnot, I have no reason to think that he's not doing his job. But what I want to do is just make sure that we're all aligned. I think that's a good thing. We should make sure that we're going to work together well for the next 4 to 8 years.
Briefly, yes.
Tim, I'd like to tell you that the Cranston Police Department has supported me. They're endorsed me.
Yeah.
The Colonel Winquist, is the #1 best colonel in the state of Rhode Island, and as long as I am the mayor, he will stay.
And the police union endorsed him. They told me this last year. They're like, Barb, he gave us a 10% raise. The union endorsement will go to him. I was told about that a year ago. When you give a union a 10% raise, I absolutely expect for them to follow through and honor their commitment to endorse him.
All right, we have just over a minute before we have to, believe it or not, get to closing statements.
Wow.
So, look, to both candidates, this is your final debate.
Yep.
You have debated a lot, which I commend both of you for that. But it's been a tense campaign, and since we're nearing the end, I'd like to have you say something nice about your opponent, Mr. Hopkins.
She's a great campaigner. She's a good politician. I'm just a regular guy, an educator, a coach, who's been leading the city for the last 8 years.
I really like the fact that Ken brought back the Veterans Day Parade. I thought that was a lovely addition to bring it back to the city. That's a great thing to do. Okay, and just a quick up or down here. In the Republican primary for U.S. Senate, who are you voting for, Patricia Morgan or Ken McKay? Ms. Fenton-Fung? Sorry. Wait, Ken is absolutely petrified right now that you just injected into this. I think I'm leaning towards Ray McKay. Ray McKay, okay.
And the endorsed candidate by the Republican Party.
There is no endorsed candidate.
Then Patricia Morgan.
Okay. All right. Now each candidate will have 1 minute.
Tim, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
But by the way,
Briefly.
The city of Cranston Republican Party has endorsed her. That's why I'm going with her.
Thank you. All right, let's get to closing statements now. As I said, each candidate will have 1 minute to give a closing statement, the order of which was drawn randomly prior to this debate. Up first is Ms. Fenton-Fung. Ms. Fenton-Fung, your 60-second closing remarks.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ted and Tim. When my husband, Alan, ran Cranston, it had such a joyful spirit, and we all worked together and got big things done. Those days are non-existent now, and the city's being held back by the chaos and rancor and the completely out of control spending because of this mayor. The mayor who was a day late, a dollar short, and 2 steps behind on almost everything. On September 10th, we'll start the journey to return to the times of Fung, bringing that sense of family and love back to our neighborhoods and for caring for each other. I've got a vision and a plan to make this the most dynamic and family-friendly city in the entire region. Yes, we'll tackle flooding, and yes, we'll create a vibrant health and biotech corridor. But we're going to do it the Fung way, with a whole lot of honesty, a whole lot of hard work, and by raising the bar of what to expect out of City Hall. I'm Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung, and I would be absolutely honored to have your vote for mayor this September.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fenton-Fung. Now, Mr. Hopkins, your 60-second closing remarks.
Thank you, Channel 12, for hosting us. I am your mayor. For the last 4 years, I have worked extremely hard to be your mayor. I have a vision called Cranston 2030. I have started that initiative with new schools, a safe city, a revitalized Main Street program in Rolfe Square, Patuxent Village, and Eatery Park. We are now continuing that along Oak Lawn Avenue. I continue to do the streets and the infrastructure. I consider Cranston to be the safest city in the state. On September 10th, I ask for your vote to complete my vision for Cranston 2030. And as always, one Cranston, one heartbeat.
All right, thank you, Mr. McKay, and Mr. Hopkins, McKay on the mind, and thank you both for taking part in this important exchange. And a reminder, Election Day is September 10th. Early voting is already underway. We have everything you need to know in our voter guide, including key dates in voter information in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. You can get to it by scanning the QR code right on your screen there, or by going to WPRI.com/vote. And speaking of debates, our last debate was between Mr. McKay and Ms. Morgan. If you missed that debate and you'd like to watch it, that was in the Republican primary for U.S. Senate. You can watch that on WPRI.com. And as always, we encourage you to subscribe to our podcast. You can do that through Apple iTunes. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We thank you for watching this Republican primary debate for Cranston Mayor.